Alright, this episode's going to be how to copy your old family heirloom quilts. So if you've got some quilts that's maybe not fully finished and there's just a small piece of it, or you've got an old quilt and it's starting to fall apart, and maybe it came out of your family, some of your back generation somewhere, and you're wanting to try to replicate this quilt, or maybe you're wanting to finish the quilt. Maybe the quilt's in good enough shape that you may want to finish the quilt and put it together, but you don't have a pattern. So I'm going to show you how to make a pattern. This is just a piece of a quilt that somebody has started, or it's fell apart. I'm not sure which, but I'm going to show you how to take an existing pattern and create a pattern from it. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take and get you some milk jugs. Save you up some milk jugs. Cut out the flat side of the milk jug in big pieces and just pour it back. You may want to do this a couple of times depending on how many jugs you get, but after you get you a bunch of milk jugs saved up and the flat parts cut out, what you're going to do is you're going to go on the back side of your old quilt pattern, where the quilt's falling apart and you can get access to the back of the quilt. You're going to get back here on this back half and you're going to measure these little pieces out. You're going to have to fold these back, iron them back out, and what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to trace each little piece to the size that you need. What you'll do is you'll put a little piece of a milk carton on there. You get you a permanent marker, and you'll basically do what this is right here. So right here is going to be your stitch line, seam allowance. You're going to copy the seam allowance that they've done on the back of the quilt. And once you iron this out and you get the seam allowance that they're using, and then you get the overall shape. Now you may want to cut just a little bit extra, because some of these, if your blocks is fraying apart like this, there may be a little extra on the edge. You may want to cut it just a little bit larger than normal, but all you're going to do is just trace over this. You could use a pencil will mark on these, but you can use a Sharpie, just a permanent marker. It will mark on this, but it will wear off if you handle it a lot, so you have to kind of be careful. But everywhere there's a little diamond or a little shape, all you're going to do is going to measure the back of it. You're going to draw it out onto this piece of a milk jug, and it's thick enough to where it'll make a pattern piece. Then all you'll do is take a pair of scissors and trim it out, and then you'll have the overall shape and you'll have the seam allowance on where to stitch. And if you have all these, all these will be the same size here, so you'll only need one of these. This might be a different size, I don't know, but you'll have to check each one of these. Now this is going to be a different shape. This big block's going to be a different shape. Anywhere there's a different shape, or the shape is a different size, you're going to have to make at least one of them. And then after you make whatever, say there's you've got 6 here to make this star. If you're wanting to make a star, then you're going to put 6 on your pattern piece, so you'll remember to cut 6 of these out when you're going to put this back together. So this is one way of making pattern pieces from an existing pattern that you don't have a pattern for. So if you've got one of these old-timey quilts and you're wanting to replicate it, or you're wanting to finish it and you don't have the pattern, this is the only way I know how to solve that. You can also use paper, but paper ain't gonna hold up very long. So this is going to be your trick, is laying these on here, tracing them out, cutting them out, doing your seam allowances on them. This will be your pattern piece, and this will be what you'll be using to cut by. Now, if you want to make a permanent pattern piece, you can take one of these pieces of a milk jug and you can actually put it on a wooden block and cut it onto a thin piece of wooden block if you want a permanent pattern piece. But that's the only way you're going to be able to make and copy a vintage quilt and get the patterns right so that it will come together. And that's the only way you're going to be able to do it. And you can see here, this is a different shape from this shape. Some of these triangles will be a different size. So this is the only way you will be able to recreate a vintage pattern, and it will be very cheap and inexpensive way of doing this. And all you'll be out is a couple of milk jugs and a permanent marker. And this is how you do this. And then you can save each one of these pattern pieces, mark it, label it, maybe even draw out the pattern and label each piece to how the pattern goes together if you want to. But that's one way that you're going to be able to recreate an old pattern and put it back together, or make an entirely new quilt from an old existing pattern. And that is one reason that I save pieces of quilts, because this one little pattern here can refabricate an entire quilt simply by using this method. So if you like vintage quilts and you want to make yourself a vintage quilt off of a family heirloom quilt that is beyond use, but there's still enough of the pattern to put it together, this is how you're going to be able to do it. And you can make it any colors, any style you want to do it. You can get any kind of modern fabric, or you can get new fabric that looks like old fabric and sew it together to recreate an old look. So if you have a whole bunch of old quilts or pieces of quilts in an attic or in a family's closet or something like that, and you want to recreate that, you can. Or if you have a piece of a quilt and the quilt was new when it was pieced and it's still good, the fabric's still good, and you want to finish the quilt, this is the only way you're going to be able to do it and get it exactly right, because you'll be able to clone each one of these patterns to the exact size, and that'll be the quickest way to do it. You just put the pieces together, label them how you want to label them, maybe even draw you out like a little map on how they go together. But this is the easiest way to make patterns for a vintage quilt. I save up a lot of these, and I've got tons of patterns that I make from existing patterns. That way, if I ever need to go back and fix an old quilt, or if I want to make a new quilt, I've got the pattern pieces copied off of it. Some of these quilts will be so old that they will literally be falling apart because the fabric is just so old that it is rotten. So that's the only way you can handle these old quilts and be able to copy one. And that's the trick to being able to save old patterns of old quilts.